Don't quite get that last one, but yeah, this is going to be fun. Indycar's been off for the last 3 weeks, apparently due to the Olympics. I don't think any big names were competing. They must just have been too distracted by Australia granting their breakdancing place to the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and this pole vaulter using his other pole to deny himself some position I couldn't be asked to watch it either. Proper sport is back now though, and while Alex Palou comes into round 14 with a sizable lead in the standings, the oval heavy nature of the second half of the season opens the doors up to Penske to make a late comeback. A position I'm sure everyone's excited for given what happened at the start of the year. If you end up enjoying the video, then be sure to drop it a like and get subscribed, and with my standard cries for help out of the way, let's get into the comedy review. It's the 2024 Bommarito Automotive Group 500 from St. Louis. Yeah, it really rolls off the tongue, that one, doesn't it? Practice ahead of qualifying for this one was about as interesting as having a conversation with Stephen Hawking, and he's been dead for a number of years. That gives us plenty of time to discuss the news, and thank Christ, because there's a fair bit of it. First things first, we found out that Rahal Lessman-Lanigan will be running an additional car for the next round of the championship in Portland to field an Estonian driver, Jüri Vips. Vips, of course, is an ex-Red Bull Junior, once tipped for a drive in Formula 1. That was before he allegedly went on stream and expressed his love for the African-American community. I don't know why I have to slap the word allegedly in there, there's literal footage of him doing it. Vips' appointment thus received the same praise online as if Jeffrey Epstein rose from the dead and took up the job of a kindergarten teacher. But thankfully, this news was soon drowned out by a far bigger story. Augustine Canapino has been too preoccupied with having his cock sucked by the NPC commentary team this season, he's forgotten that he actually has to drive every now and again. Despite being held in similarly high regard by Junko's Hollinger team, his inability to navigate a corner in Toronto appeared to prove too much, as the Argentinian has now been dropped for the remainder of the season. Oh, and if there are any RGs left and you're angry at my reaction to this news, here's your friendly reminder that these still belong to us. Right, since I'm now on borrowed time, let's cover the final few stories headed into this one. Connor Daly would return to the series, filling in for Canapino, though apparently didn't have time for an extra photo shoot, and David Malukas had been highly rumoured with a switch to RLL for the 2025 season. Oh, never mind, Lil Days pulled a curveball and gone to the dark side. Malukas confirmed that he'd actually put pen to paper with AJ Foyt for next year, in what we expect to be in the 41 entry, given the Ferret has welcomed him warmly into the team. That said, if you remember Benjamin Pedersen, he appeared to believe he had a drive for this season before falling off the face of the planet. It's a conflicting situation for me. Obviously, I'm a big Malukas fan, but now he appears to be taking the job away from my other boy, Stingray here. You're in my prayers, brother. May your Christian Cash find you another spot on the grid for next season. Anyway, should we get to practice one? There's not a whole lot to talk about, but Malukas did top the session, which is pretty cool. Alex Palou was debuting a new livery for the number 10 car, with a new primary sponsor in Samaritan's Purse. They apparently provide physical as well as spiritual aid, whatever the that is, to people suffering from war and natural disasters, which sounds respectable enough, but why have they picked the primary colours of white, blue and sick? The Spaniard was one of a number of drivers to pick up 9-place grid drops for the race on Saturday evening, with Rosenquist, Dixon and whoever ends up in the 51 Dale Coyne car this week also suffering the same fate for engine changes. That Coyne racer will be Catherine Legg, by the way, for the 5 people who actually care. If you haven't been able to gather yet, nothing major was actually happening out on track. The Seagull showed us McLaren had some shopping trolley physics in the pit lane though. Elsewhere, Graham Rahal was moaning about something I just couldn't be bothered to listen to, which is nothing new anyway, and the Ferret was also mad his car wasn't able to turn left as good as the others. Let's prix.com then for some actual material to present itself come qualifying. All eyes on David Malukas, who has 2 podiums already at this circuit. He was quick once again, setting a marker good enough for P2 at the end of the day. The only car able to beat Malukas in the opening stages was his Meyershank teammate Felix Rosenquist, but of course he carries that penalty, and the prospect of a Lil Dave front row looked even more tantalising when both Newgarden and Kirkwood were unable to challenge on their runs. The second Penske of Scotty Mack, however, would pull out bigger balls than that French pole vaulter and slot himself into the top of the timings. And then all eyes turned to Andretti and Colton Herta, who looked strong in opening practice, and never mind the bottles come early this weekend. So with Herta's new rear wing angle being perhaps slightly less than optimal for an Indycar oval, McLaughlin was on the pole, with title rival Palou starting down in 16th following his grid drop. That sets up an exciting Grand Prix then. But first, we have more practice to discuss, and good news, something actually happened this time. These last 60 minutes would run in similar conditions to the race, with almost identical track and ambient temperatures, and Ed Carpenter acting like a f***ing terrorist. Nolan Seagull, meanwhile, found himself in a new situation. He had the added challenge of a new spotter this weekend, and the other added challenge of his car wanting David Malukas back. Seagull had a tyre failure at high speed on his run, it occurring strangely on one of the straights, although it was this fact that allowed the rookie to control the incident and not find himself joining the rest of the Papaya army in the grandstands. Elsewhere on track, the Gamebridge Honda had been repaired and was back out, although it did throw a strop in the pit lane. In fairness, I'd do that too if my driver had already rear-ended me into a wall and it wasn't even race day yet. On the subject of hitting the wall, new Junko signing Connor Daly did a nice Canapino tribute by slamming the barrier in the closing minutes, seemingly taking half of Worldwide Technology Raceway home as a souvenir. Anyway, O'Ward topped the session, and with that, let's finally get to the green flag. With no Augustine Canapino in the field, all 27 Indycars made it cleanly around lap 1, McLaughlin getting the early jump with Malukas in hot pursuit. Colton Herta had a lot to do from P25 on the starting grid, proceeding to weave his way through the pack in what would make me think the American must be cheating, until you remember that these are just back markers and he's not driving for Penske. Lap 2 saw Power take second from Little Dave in a very clean move, promising signs that we'd be in for an exciting and overtake-ridden Grand Prix, with all drivers being firm yet fair, and you just know this is being deliberately worded to age like shit, don't you? It wouldn't take long for the drama to develop, but at the rear of the field, Catherine Legg was filling her usual role of not having a role, and thus decided she could be better utilised as a form of euthanasia for Ed Carpenter. Unfortunately, she couldn't even do that correctly, only removing herself from the action as the first caution flags waved and the field was neutralised. We'd return to racing on lap 15, with Herta continuing his charge from the back, and friend of the show, David Malukas, battling up to the lead. The piece wouldn't last long, however, as after a mere 2 tours of Worldwide Technology Raceway, the Junko's cars were in the wars once again. Rinus VeeKay finally discovered he had a brake pedal, though this probably wasn't the best time to use it, causing a chain reaction which saw Daly spin and Grosjean peg Carl Kirkwood. With the AutoNation car now pointing at 90 degrees in a straight line, it was pretty much day done for the Andretti man. Everyone else, meanwhile, still had 230 laps to go. Malukas quickly relinquished the lead to Power on the restart, another clean overtake from the pair, while Pato O'Ward was also on the charge further back in the top 10. The Mexican still has an outside hope at the championship this year. At least he did before his McLaren decided it had seen enough only a handful of laps later. There were 2 groups forming in the strategy battle at this point. The leaders opted to stay out despite the raft of early cautions, whilst Ericsson and Dixon headed a separate train of cars who had boxed early. There was also Stingray Rob, who was doing something else, I'm just not quite sure what it was. We'd actually see the race settle down for a while after this, before Kiffin Simpson opted to show off the new slogan on his rear wing as he brought out the yellows on lap 86. I mean, forfeiting the final 180 tours is one way to save gas, I guess. The timing of the caution made it even harder to work out who had it right on strategy. Siegel and Ericsson were now battling for the lead of the early stopping group, until the kamikaze attempt from the 6 saw the McLaren fall behind the Ganassi of Dixon. Siegel then decided that he would pull off his practice antics in the pit lane again, only this time he failed to meet the speed limit and thus wiped himself out of contention. Ericsson's race would end shortly after, due to a mix of his car overheating and his team not knowing what the fuck to do in a pit stop apparently. We'd been green for a surprisingly long time by this point, though Newgarden and McLaughlin were seemingly doing everything in their power to make it 3 airborne crashes in as many races. Scotty Mack held the advantage, partly due to his ability and partly due to Newgarden cocking it up and bringing out the yellows again. That, funnily enough, brought the American back into things, while Power and Malukas opted to pit and race their way back to the front of the pack. Malukas wasn't satisfied with just another podium, however, and began to take advantage of lap traffic to make a bid for the effective race lead. Things were looking a little bit different from the 2 cars' perspective, as Power used all his finesse and experience to close off the fast-charging Meyershank and expected to disappear or something. Malukas was spun backwards into the wall, which was apparently his fault for some reason. The yellows were out, and the only thing still keeping me alive was that there was now enough retirements to place Stingray in the shot for a top 10 finish. The AJ Foyt racer had actually been having a pretty decent weekend, only he decided to get his arse in gear after qualifying down in 24th place. He'd make things work, however, even leading the running briefly, which my Twitter followers were keen to remind me of. The boy sat in 10th as the leading Penske's gained a free pit stop for fresh rubber. It was here that Newgarden was able to jump McLaughlin, and we were set for a thrilling 10-lap shootout as the sun set in St. Louis. Oh, but that was about to change. Newgarden decided for whatever reason that he would identify as an Indy Next driver for the restart, trundling to the green, causing mass confusion and panic behind. In what, as a Maluka simp I can only describe as complete f***ing karma, Will Power found himself caught up in said confusion, being mounted by a horny Rossi in an incident that also put Grosjean out of his misery and somehow saw Harvey make an exit from the race as well. I'll be honest, I forgot he was even taking part in this one. The red flags were out, and Power was very displeased. He flipped off Newgarden, made little Dave cry, and mutilated Dylan Welch when he tried to snatch an interview. It would be a lengthy wait before the race could resume, and when it did, Knight had... What? Oh, you want one of these, do you? The race would finally resume with a 6-lap shootout deciding the winner of this one. Newgarden didn't appear to be a big fan of that, however, and shot up the road quickly towards victory. Further back, Tech Tips was on the charge. The Swede is in the battle to retain his Ganassi drive for next season, and what better way to make a statement than take points away from your teammate who's battling for the championship. In fairness to Lundqvist, he had far more pace than the cars around him, soon snatching the final place on the podium from Herta in an audacious move that was eventually proved to be pointless after the 26 was penalised for not being a Penske. Newgarden, meanwhile, was uncatchable and crossed the line to win at Worldwide Technology Raceway for the 5th time in his career. Palou, meanwhile, managed to luck his way to 4th, having dodged every incident in this one, so this championship is probably already over anyway. What a Grand Prix though. Hang on, wait, what's that? Stingray! How could I forget? Stingray Rob, P9. Let's f***ing go. I'm still sad about Malukas, but this almost makes up for it. Indycar is back and ready for a rapid-fire end to the season. Next up is the final road course in Portland next week, and I'll be back to cover that one, so if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Let me know what you thought of the race in the comments below, and while you're there, drop this vid a like. Think of each one as a prayer for Will Power's counsellor. A huge thank you to the members and patrons who got a preview of this one early, and if that sounds interesting to you, then head over to the links in the description down below. Now, quite honestly, I need some sleep, so I'll be back very soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.